The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear, and the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist, but we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, and I thank you for joining me here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to mention an account. I recently received a telephone call describing a harrowing account from the eyewitness, who I'll just call LH. The incident occurred on the night of October 27th, 1969, in Rolling Prairie, Indiana, and LH was a young child at the time. He states that he and his family, mother, father, sister, and grandmother, were living in a trailer situated on their family's land. The trailer has sustained damage on the roof, leaving a large hole. The hole was covered with a wide waterproof tarp until it was going to be repaired. Now, LH and his baby sister shared a bedroom. Now, he was awakened by a strange noise and a strong disagreeable odor. Now, as he looked towards his sister's crib, he saw a tall winged humanoid staring down at her. The being slowly turned and looked at a horrified LH. The description was a very tall being that was crouched a bit. LH estimates that it stood 7 to 8 foot in height. The body and face had black hair. The leather-like wings were huge and shaped like that of a bat or a gargoyle. It had muscular, detached arms and legs. The body and face were thin and looked like a human skeleton with obvious sharp teeth. The eyes were dark. It also made a low, garbled sound. Now, LH screamed in order to alert his parents in the adjoining room, but they never responded. His grandmother was alerted and came to his aid, though she was stunned at the sight and immediately fell to her knees. The creature picked up LH in his arms and made its way into the living room, where it ascended through the hole in the ceiling. It's obvious it had moved the tarp in order to gain access into the trailer. Now, LH remembers being very cold and wet and hearing his grandmother screaming as the winged humanoid took off into the sky. He has no idea how long he was gone, but only remembers waking in his bed among his panicked parents and grandmother. Now, LH states that his grandmother witnessed the entire event and documented it. His living relatives concur with the account, since his grandmother recalled what had happened to each of them. His grandmother passed away in 1985. Now, LH's parents woke after the abduction. It seems that they were somehow placed into a hypnotic state of some type until the winged being left the premises with LH. After several minutes, they all heard scratching noises and a loud thud on the roof. LH's father immediately gained access to the roof, where he saw LH lying unconscious. They were able to bring LH back into the trailer, dry him off, and place him in his bed. They were reluctant to call the authorities or seek medical assistance because of the bizarre event. Now, LH recovered, but has had emotional problems his entire life, which he attributes to the abduction. Now, at the time that the Mothman Prophecies film release, he had a mental breakdown after watching it in the theater. he literally had to leave during the scene where the Mothman caused the automobile crash and death. He has not attempted to watch the film since. I asked LH why he called me. He stated that he had received a call from his cousin who was aware of the winged humanoid sightings in Indiana. That's when he was given my contact information. So I am currently in the process of contacting his relatives. I was able to get a hold of one, and they absolutely verified and corroborated the account. LH seemed very forthright, but he was very nervous. He seemed relieved that there had been other witnesses to a similar winged being in the state of Indiana. So let's get started with tonight's show. Tonight's guest is paranormal investigator and author Dave Spinks. And Dave has been researching and investigating the paranormal since 1986. He retired from a 20-plus year career in the U.S. military and federal law enforcement in 2011. Since that time, he has conducted several hundred investigations, including hauntings, reports of strange creatures, as well as UFO encounters. His latest book is West Virginia Bigfoot, and his website can be found at DaveSpinksParanormalInvestigator.com. Dave is also the co-founder of the Society of the Supernatural with his colleague, researcher David Weatherly. So, Dave, thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Lon.
So, you were born and raised in the mountains of West Virginia, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories over the years. But can you tell us a bit about your personal encounter with Bigfoot?
Yeah, back in 1983, me and my grandfather, my dad's dad, were fishing at a local area here that, one of our favorite spots on the Gauley River. And I was only 13 years old at the time. And I was living in New Mexico at the time with my mom and my stepdad because he was in the military. And that's where I really grew up. I was born here in West Virginia. Both sets of my grandparents and all the rest of my family were here in West Virginia, my dad included. And, I would relish in the times I got to spend with my grandparents and my dad. We'd often go hunting and fishing when I got to come home to visit everybody. And this was one of those times. And we were fishing at one of our favorite spots. And we usually would camp out, at that location. It had a nice sandy beach and everything on the river and just a great spot. And that particular evening, we had caught our limit, of a fish, and we had fried them up on the fire and ate like champs. We were full, having a good old time, and we were sitting in the chair just relaxing. And out of nowhere, a giant splash happened out in the middle of the river. Well, we didn't know what caused the splash. Of course, it startled us. We jumped up. We were looking around trying to figure out what it was because it was huge. I mean, it was something very large, because, when something large hits the water like that, it often rains down water, and that's what it was. It was just this huge kaploosh, and then you could hear all the rain just coming down from the splash. Well, the other side of the river was very steep, and it's an area where people would very rarely go because of the steepness of it. And, I just thought that was strange, but we didn't see anything in the water at the time. So my grandpa thought, well, maybe a rock rolled off the cliff over there, or a large branch had fallen out of one of the trees, and hit the water, but we didn't see any branch floating. So that was kind of out of the question. So after a few minutes of looking around, we just chalked it up as whatever, and we kind of sat back down. And within a few minutes, you hear what sounds like something crashing through the trees. And I look up out of the corner of my eye, and I see a huge boulder type rock coming through the trees at an upward angle, and it comes down and hits out in the middle of the water. Well, we jump up, and we're trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And I look back for my grandpa, and he's running for the tent. I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And then I realized he was going to get the shotgun. So he comes back with the old single shotgun, squirrel gun, whatever you want to call it. And he yells across the river and says, "You heathens, knock it off or I'm going to shoot." So in his mind, he's thinking it's people messing with us,
Mm-hmm.
And this rock that I saw was humongous. I mean, a grown man probably couldn't fit his arms all the way around it. You know, that's how big it was. And as he's yelling out, you hear this just very loud, guttural freaking roar, scream, whatever you want to call it. And it scared the hell out of me. And he cracks off a shot over there. And then you hear the thing scream again. And then the trees start shaking. Like we're talking 40, 50, 60 foot, you know, trees that are fairly large around, you know, and they start shaking violently as this thing's screaming and hollering and carrying on over there. Well, you know, and this is the short version of the story, by the way. So, so he yells at me, you know, get to the truck, boy. And the truck was about 20, 30 yards away. I run to the truck, and it was parked in a way where I could kind of squat down behind the front fender and peek around at what was going on. And my grandfather fires off, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 shots over there. Now, that point of the river is about 60, anywhere from 50 to 75 yards across. An old single shotgun is not going to hurt anything. It might piss something off, but, you know, if it was people, it'd make them stand up and pay attention. But, you know, so as I'm peeking around trying to get a look at whatever the heck it is over there, and my grandfather's, you know, firing off rounds over that way, I see this large, hairy, you know, bipedal creature walking up about a 45-degree angle up the mountain away from us, and I can follow it by seeing the trees shake. I mean, this thing rip-roaring, tearing the woods down. And I only see it from about maybe a little bit above the waist, you know, up. I don't see the lower part of it, but you could tell it was walking like a man, and it was just smashing trees as it went through, you know, and just making one hell of a ruckus. Well, about that time, I look and my grandpa comes running towards me. I guess that, you know, he had seen what I saw, and he grabbed me with one arm and threw me in the truck from his side, and I never touched anything. I just slammed against the passenger side. And he said, we're getting out of here, boy. That's not of God. Because my grandfather was a preacher. He's a Baptist minister for 40 years. So he peels out of there. We're taking off up the mountain, you know, just bottoming the truck out. I got my hands in my head and my head in my hands, thinking that I'm going to die because the truck's going to break down and that thing's going to get us. So we finally make it up out of the woods. It was about a 2-mile drive up out of there on a really rough dirt road, you know, wasn't maintained or anything. We're bottoming out, hitting potholes. And it sounds like pieces of the truck are just falling off. You know, I'm just like, oh my God, we're gonna get stranded and that thing's gonna get us. So we finally make it back to the hardtop. We drive around for a while. My grandfather's not saying anything, and I was scared because he was scared. And this guy, he's not scared of nothing. You know, he stormed the beaches at Normandy. I mean, he was a medic in World War II. He's seen everything. You know, and to see him scared really scared me even more. So we pull off the road finally after about a half an hour driving around, and he said, son, we better not tell no one about this because they're going to think we're crazy. And, you know, and he was he didn't want his parishioners thinking he was drinking or whatever the case may be, you know. So I never talked about it, you know, and there's kind of a funny side to this story too. So I kept that quiet all these years, but at the same time, I wanted to know what the heck it was that I saw. And, you know, back in those days, we didn't have the luxury of the internet. So I was, you know, I had to search the local libraries, magazine articles, and newspapers and whatnot. And lo and behold, I started coming across other accounts from people around the world that have seen something very similar to what I saw. So I knew what I saw then. I wasn't crazy. You know, other people had seen this type of creature. And then I saw, you know, I never even heard of the Patterson-Gimlin film. I didn't even know about Bigfoot back then until I started, you know, finding out other people had seen it. And then I saw the show In Search Of. And I was like, oh, okay, there's something to this. You know, there's something going on here. So the funny part of the story is, you know, it's been about almost 3 years ago now. He died. And I never told anybody about, you know, because I promised him. We made a promise. Mm-hmm. So I called my uncle up and I said, hey, I'm gonna write about, you know, something that happened to me and Grandpa, you know, back in the woods when we were fishing back in '83. I'm gonna write about it in a book. And he said, "Oh, you're talking about that time you and Papa saw that monkey man in the woods." And I'm like, "What?" I said, he told you? And he said, "Yeah, he told me like 20, 25 years ago, told me the whole story." And he came to me one day and he said, "Hey, Stanton, I got to get something off my chest. In case something happens to me, I want someone else to know what me and David saw that day." So here I am keeping that stuff secret the whole, my entire life almost. And he told my uncle about it. So I was just sitting there dumbfounded. And then my uncle proceeds to tell me that he and his friends had an encounter pretty near the same place we did many years before that, when they were young kids out there. They used to go to this old moonshiner's cave and they would camp out and drink and carry on and stuff. And then he told me about our Uncle George, who was my grandma's brother, who was in, several miles away, but pretty much in the same vicinity. He was cutting firewood in that area one time, and he had an encounter with one. So out of nowhere, I had all these reports just from my immediate family, which really blew me away, and I was like, wow. And then over the years, as I, investigated and researched more into this stuff, I started, accumulating all these accounts from many people in West Virginia, friend of friends, and, stuff like that. And I had enough to put in a book, and I've got a lot more. And that's basically how the book came about.
Well, that's pretty similar to how I got interested in it as well, because I had my encounter in 81. And, of course, I'd heard of Bigfoot, but, and I had been involved with the paranormal for a while, but I had no real intentions of going looking for cryptids. But, when you see something like that, it makes a big impression. And, of course, you want to know what the hell it was you saw. So, yeah, I can understand it completely.
Yeah, that's really what started me in the paranormal, that's what really, I had to know what the hell it was I saw, and I wanted to know, I wanted answers. What, am I crazy, or what did we see here? So it just, it just set me on my own path, so to speak, and been doing it ever since, really.
So what part of West Virginia was this?
It's in Nicholas County. It's a river called the Gauley River, and it runs into the New River Gorge.
Okay.
I now live only about a little less than 5 miles away from where the encounter happened. I live on top of a mountain in the middle of the woods, and it's very, very close. And I'm actively researching that area again. But, after my encounter, I didn't go into the woods for several years, and I grew up hunting and fishing, and
yeah.
It really scared the living hell out of me, because this thing was massive. It was like my grandpa was a huge man. He was 6'5", just a big hulking man. And this thing was 2 of him wide. And, when something has enough power to shake a tree like this thing was doing, these were huge freaking trees, man, probably at least 12, 15 inches around, 60 feet tall. And they were shaking like they were twigs in the air, and branches were falling off of them and everything else. And the sound this thing makes just sends shivers. I'll never forget it. I used to have nightmares about it when I was a kid because of the sound. It was so guttural and so loud. And then on top of that, it echoed through the canyon, and it was just, man, you will never mistake that sound, And
yeah, I don't know. I agree. It's definitely a life-changing experience when you see something like that. And, you're preaching to the choir, because I know exactly what it feels like. Now, West Virginia, West Virginia is pretty well known for Bigfoot sightings. There have been a lot of reports that have come out throughout the state that, what aspects of the Bigfoot that are reported in West Virginia, or are they about the same as anywhere else, or is there's some bit of a difference?
Well, I think if you take a look at like the BFRO, and there's some other reporting sites like the GCBRO, or pardon me if I said that wrong, but there's several internet reporting sites. And if you look at the BFRO, they've got around 100, between 100 and 105, something like that, reports just in West Virginia. And then if you take the other one, they've got, I don't know, 50 or so. But I myself, I have at least that many, if not more. And then how many other people, have reports that don't line up with the same ones, that are already reported on the internet? And then there's lots and lots of people that have had encounters, and they don't share it with other folks. They might tell their brother-in-law or, someone close to them, because people, especially in rural areas, people are pretty tight-lipped about stuff like that. And they don't want people coming in here, and they don't want people thinking they're crazy, and that's what's really compelling about some of the reports I put in the book. These are coming from police officers, lawyers, doctors, teachers, people that have something, reputations to that could be damaged, by coming out and going out into the public and saying, hey, one night I saw this freaking 8-foot tall hairy creature in my backyard, or whatever the case may be, So you got to take that into consideration when you read these type of reports and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. What areas of West Virginia do you consider hotspots? Now, I know for a fact, the reports I've received out of West Virginia, it seems like some of the strangest reports come out of the Dolly Sods area. Now, I've gotten upright canines and other type of cryptid sightings there, but it seems that area itself offers a lot of different types of cryptid sightings.
Yeah, I think West Virginia in general is a small state, and the number of reported sightings is actually really high for such a small, state. But you got to take into account the state in general also is very rural and very mountainous and very remote in some places. Mm-hmm. Now, the area you're talking about is Dolly Sods, and that lies right in the heart of the Monongahela National Forest.
Right.
The Monongahela is a very, very remote and rugged area of the state. It's a huge expanse of land, and there are literally thousands of cave systems. There's plenty of cover and food for an animal such as Bigfoot to survive. There's, that's where they basically take all the problematic bears and they dump them, take them out of the suburban areas and whatnot.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, they take all the bears out there and dump them off there because it's so remote, it's a huge expanse. And Dolly Sods, yes, does have a very large amount of reports of Bigfoot. That whole area over in there is just one of those areas that have reports of pretty much everything. Dogmen, Bigfoot, goat. I've even got a few goat man sightings in that area, but some of those could be mistaken identities. Someone saw a Bigfoot, thought it was a dog man, or vice versa, But Bigfoot as a whole in West Virginia is literally, all around the state. Of course, I think as I call it, the Monongahela National Forest is a very hot spot. Up north on the border of PA and West Virginia, Chestnut Ridge area, because Chestnut Ridge runs right into Morgantown, right on the outskirts of Morgantown. There's a lot of reports at Cooper's Rock and all that area up there. There's also a lot of reports down here in the southern counties, southeastern counties, like Greenbrier County. Pocahontas County has a bunch, and all these counties lie right on the edge, and some are right in the Monongahela National Forest. Even Monroe County down on the border of Virginia has a lot of accounts, and there's a really good one in my book. A man, woke up one morning, fresh snow on the ground, and there's a single trackway coming out of his cow pasture, going right past his house under a clothesline, and the tracks were like, he has a big walking stick he carries, and he laid it down next to the tracks. You can see it in the book. I think it was 67 inches apart, the spread on this thing.
That's long.
Yeah, it was huge. And they actually recovered a tuft of hair on the clothesline because the thing had actually grabbed a hold of the clothesline and went underneath of it. And they turned it in. There was police officers involved in everything. They turned it in and never heard anything back. this and got no information, no response after numerous inquiries because they were trying to get a DNA sample off of it. The local veterinarian and everything was involved. And it goes to show you that, to me, it's one of those cover-up situations again.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know about that.
Yep.
Why don't you give us another account that's one of your favorites out of the book?
Oh, yeah. One of the most bizarre ones is from a friend of mine who's another Bigfoot researcher in the state. His name's Chris Allen, and him and his ex-wife. His ex-wife was a naturalist, worked for the state, and they camped out all the time. I'm talking all times of year, out in the middle of the boondocks, in the snow and everything. And one of the accounts in the book he gave me was really just mind-blowing. And you've probably heard some accounts like this from other states and whatnot. But anyway, as it goes, him and his wife went out to an area, and a camping area, and it wasn't a remote area, but it was a location where people camp, but it was in the middle of the winter and nobody was there. So they pitched a tent, and he said right away his two dogs, who were always happy-go-lucky, were acting very, very strange, out of the norm. They didn't want to run around and play like dogs do, and they just wanted in their little box that he kept them in the wintertime to keep them warm. So he opened in the box, and they hopped in, and they didn't come out. And there was about 1.5 feet of snow on the ground. And so he got his tent set up and everything, and they went to bed for the night. And in the middle of the night, he heard all this ruckus going on outside. And as he's laying there, he was about to get up, and he looked over at his wife, and she was laying there in the tent, next to him, and her eyes were very wide-eyed and bugged out. And he said a hand pressed in on the tent and went all the way down and touched him on the chest. And he said the hand was big. The hand alone was as big as his whole chest. Well, anyway, they didn't move. They didn't get out. They didn't know what to do. Waited till the crack, and he kind of like smacked at the tent, and the hand just let off, and nothing else happened. So they waited till the crack of dawn. He started peeking his head out, and he started seeing all these deer tracks around his tent, and there was just it looked like a whole herd of deer had come through there. Then he started noticing what looked like human barefoot tracks all around, and they were huge, 15, 18 inches, he said, roughly. He was just guesstimating because he didn't have, a ruler with him or anything. So he starts looking around, and he said the dogs would still not come out of the box. They were whimpering and whining. And he starts looking around, and he said, man, something's just not right here. And they started packing up their gear and stuff. And he saw something laying off the side of the camp there. And he walked over, and he found a doe deer laying there with steam still coming out of her mouth. And there was like a football-sized rock impaled in her chest. And he said man, it freaked him out. He didn't know what to do. And he knew right then and there that it seemed like to him that the Bigfoot were possibly hunting deer. And they hauled Bud out of there. They packed their gear up and left because they felt like something was watching them, and they were like, and they were out of there. And that's a really startling account because you hear all these accounts of Bigfoot's killing deer for food and whatnot. So, and that happened right here in West Virginia as well.
Well, when you talked about the Chestnut Ridge and that whole area runs down from Westmoreland County down south into West Virginia. Now, I'm pretty sure you're aware of other activity, especially UFO activity associated with Bigfoot sightings. Have you run across a lot of that in West Virginia?
I've got several accounts from folks over the years that had either saw a UFO and then had a Bigfoot encounter, or vice versa. They saw a Bigfoot and then saw strange lights in the sky. So it just makes you wonder that is there some kind of correlation, or are they related? Are these things ETs, or are ETs watching them as well? We don't know. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Yeah, there does seem to be some correlation there. I mean, the more and more that we've been looking into cryptid activity, and I'm just not talking about Bigfoot, there does seem to be a connection somehow with other type of paranormal activity. I hear more researchers and investigators talk about that. Orb activity associated with Bigfoot sightings, UFO activity. It just seems, and it's interesting because, years ago, you didn't hear a whole lot about that. But it does seem now, for whatever reason, it's either people are being more observant or they're not as reluctant to mention it associated with the sighting. But there does seem to be more of that coming forward.
Yeah, I think a lot of that, Lon, would be, back in the old days, you've been around a while, you couldn't do both. You were either a UFO researcher / investigator or a Bigfoot guy.
Yeah.
And if you tried to talk about the two in the same sentence to the wrong people, I mean, they would get really irate, and now, thankfully, it's coming to a point where people are starting to notice there's a lot of similarities and a lot of crossover, with these type of encounters and sightings and stuff. So folks are finally starting to think outside the box a little bit better, and seeing if there is some kind of relation between these things.
Well, and also, I mean, there just seems to be, I don't know, you look at the situation or the theories about Bigfoot itself as being either flesh and blood, indigenous, or some type of supernatural being. There used to be a point where you very rarely could get anybody to agree with you or talk to you about the supernatural possibilities. But I think more and more researchers are getting to be open-minded about it, and it seems to be a little more accepted now as compared to what it used to be.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, you have more encounters and reports coming in from people that have claimed to have seen a Bigfoot walking in the woods and simply go behind a tree and disappear, and their trackway stops and everything. So, you have to take some of those reports into consideration like that. Does it have supernatural abilities? Is it from another dimension? Is it an ET? We don't know. That's what we're all doing. We're trying to find answers to the puzzle,
Now, in your time investigating in West Virginia or anywhere else, what have you come across any distinctive physical evidence?
I've got a few tracks that I consider legit. Some folks, they'll call you up and they'll say, "Hey, I got these weird tracks in my yard," or whatever the case. You go out and check them out, and they turn out to be just bear tracks, one inside the other one. But I've got a few castings of tracks here in the state, and few pics and stuff like that. Never seen any actually, like, I wish I could come across a tuft of hair or something that I could say was definitely Bigfoot, but and get it turned in. But unfortunately, I haven't come across any of that yet. Like I said, I was involved with that case where they turned in the one down there in Monroe County and never got a single word or anything back with anything on it. And their calls and emails are just disregarded and never answered.
Right.
So, it's highly suspicious. At least they could tell them something, but they wouldn't tell them anything. Like I said, they could have said, no, it was a bear, or it was this, or it was that, but nothing. That's highly suspect to me,
So if someone wanted to, what's that?
Like that. A lot of weird tree breaks and few structures I've come across in the woods, stuff like that. So,
yeah.
The typical stuff everyone seems to find, but as of yet, no hard evidence.
Yeah. Well, if somebody was interested in going out and investigating Bigfoot, if say they came to you and asked you, well, what should I do? What should I expect? What would you say to them?
I say, well, I hope you got a whole lot of time and money. No,
it's not something you aren't getting paid for or ever should plan to make any money off of.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a fun thing to do. The first thing I would recommend is get with some folks that have been doing it for a while. Kind of tag along and watch how they do things, and formulate your own opinions, and go with them and learn. Just do more listening than talking. And see how things are done. And there's a whole bunch of different things. You have to know how to interview folks. You have to ask the right type of questions to these folks, and then you need to have a good background in tracking, I would say, what to look for and what to know what is legit and what is something, what's the difference between a bear track and a Bigfoot, stuff like that. You need to know the basics of some of that stuff at least. And, do a lot of reading, that's about the tips I could give someone. Read, man, and get with folks that have been doing it a while. I mean, that's only, really all you can do.
Right. So what's your personal opinion on the paraphysic aspects of Bigfoot or the theories? Do you believe that it's all flesh and blood, some is flesh and blood, or there's supernatural, this is a supernatural being?
Well, I'm still formulating my opinion on that, Lon, but I think what I saw was a flesh and blood creature that may have some type of supernatural abilities, whatever they may be. I mean, I saw the thing until it disappeared into the thicket, and I didn't see any supernatural powers, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, when I saw mine. But you got to remember too, I was a 13-year-old boy and I was scared out of my wits. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Right. So but over the years, hearing all these other reports from folks, having seen them disappear, and then you talk about, people seeing strange lights in the sky and everything else when these things are being seen, then, you got to kind of step back and say, whoa, what is this thing? And there's many different takes on that from many different researchers and investigators. Some people think it's some sort of Native American spirit that is a protector of the woods. Some people think it's an interdimensional creature. Some people think it's an ET, and some people think it's the missing link between man and ape. So, I'm not sure what the hell it is. I'm just trying to, I'm doing my thing, trying to find answers like everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've come maybe full circle as far as what, my thoughts have been on Bigfoot. When I first had the encounter, and that was in 81, I was all flesh and blood. I figured, I saw this thing and I figured, well, this thing is real. And I wasn't even thinking about this thing being possibly something other than a flesh and blood being. But, after all these years of receiving reports from people, talking to people, you really start to question it. There's just too much anecdotal evidence, and it is anecdotal, but it's still evidence. And some of it is so weird and so hard to believe. You get somebody says they be following, and it just suddenly disappear, and there's no way in hell this thing ducked behind a tree or got someplace where they didn't see it. Or you'd follow a track line and it just suddenly ends like the thing sprouted wings and took off. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you hear, and you hear it more and more nowadays, and it makes you wonder.
Yeah, and these reports are, like I said, they're coming from credible people like law enforcement officers and whatnot, that really have nothing to gain by, sharing their encounters and their sightings of these things. They're just as stumped as the rest of us when they had their encounter. And, when they tell you things like that, you have to stand up and pay attention to it.
Yeah, there's just a lot of it out there. I mean, you just kind of wonder what, and and this is another thing. I mean, Butch Wachowski and I have been working on these upright canine sightings up here in Pennsylvania. Of course, we're getting, you get these dogman or upright canine sightings in a lot of different places, and there's a lot down in West Virginia too. But you wonder now how many, if some of the sightings people are getting are a misidentification. I mean, if it was one of these uprights, or if it was actually a Bigfoot.
Right, and to me, primarily, most of my encounters seem to have been reported, as being at night. And that's very easy with shadows and stuff like that to, think you saw something and it may have looked like a wolf man or a dog man, because of the shadow play involved. Most people here that live out, like say where I live out in the mountainous areas, they all have dusk to daylight lights, and they create a lot of shadows around the trees. So, it definitely could be misidentification in some cases, but not always. It just is what it is. Have to take all that into account. And, they might have thought it had a canid type nose and face on it, but it could have been a shadow as well. It's just hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you got the thing 5 feet in front of your vehicle and it's standing there looking you in the face, then, there's always that chance of a misidentification of something.
Well, why don't you give us another account that is kind of high on your list?
There's one that's another favorite of mine, and it comes from a 3-year-old little boy. Now, a 3-year-old little boy would not know anything about a Bigfoot or what it was, that he saw. He just told everyone what he saw.
Right.
And the story is right here right down the road in Richwood, West Virginia. When he saw this thing, he was 3. He was almost 4. And his mom, his house, and his grandpa's house were basically right next door to each other. And he would go, he would play. And this encounter happened during the day too. He would play and run back and forth from his grandpa's house to his house. They were right there, 20 feet away or whatever. Well, between the houses, the mountain went up behind their houses, and there was an old logging road there behind the house and whatnot. And he was out there playing, and one evening it was, still daylight, plenty of daylight left. And he saw what he reported as being a large, hairy man looking at him, covered in hair, and he freaked out and he went screaming home, and he, to this day, he does not play outside by himself. And he's about 7 or 8 years old now. And, his whole account was describing a Bigfoot. He said it was bigger than his dad and his grandpa. It was covered in brownish red hair, and it was standing there looking at him. And it really affected him. So, and I actually talked to the kid and interviewed him, and you could tell. I mean, he was telling the truth. He still will describe it exactly the same as he did when he was that little today. So,
you talk about a child and experience with Bigfoot. I have to go back to that recent encounter where the boy down in North Carolina was lost.
Oh, yeah.
And he told everybody that he was actually rescued by a bear. Now, I don't know what to really think about it. I believe he either had contact with a Bigfoot or some hairy alien of some type, but I don't believe it was a bear.
No, a bear would have ate him. Being that little,
even being a black bear, he would have took it. He took him out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that's a food source for a bear. A little kid that small. Yeah. I mean, and another thing is this time of year, the black bears are even hibernating. So
that's right.
They are not out and about very rarely unless it's some kind of sick bear. And if it would have been a sick rabid bear, it would have took the kid out anyway. So it does not make sense. It was, to me, I wholeheartly think it was a Bigfoot.
Well, that story, and when I first heard about that story, then I heard about this teacher being mauled to death down there as well. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I talked to one of the people that was involved with the search for this child, and I I was trying to get someone who was involved with it to give me the skinny on it. And this guy was with one of the local authorities. I mean, he was, one of the sheriff's office, I believe that's what it was. And he told me, he said, there was nobody out there looking for a bear. When this kid, after this kid was found, they wanted to look around. There were a lot of helicopter searches to see if there was, what was going on, and they weren't looking for a bear.
No.
So, I think I thought it was interesting that they were actually following up on this after the kid was found, but apparently there were people interested in trying to get behind the story. I guess they probably would have done that because, say somebody would have kidnapped the kid and they had told them, but, not to say anything and say, look, make up some story. But, I don't know. I don't know what the situation was, but he told me, he said, we were not looking for no bear. So I don't know. I don't know what to believe as far as that goes, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And, it goes back to that story way back in the 70s. That little boy, Dennis, was kidnapped down there in Tennessee.
Yeah.
By what reports, people said was a large, hairy man that had him over his shoulder and was running off with him. Yeah. And they even had the Green Berets involved in that. They searched for this kid for weeks and weeks, and he disappeared and his family was right there.
Yep.
Like 20 yards away. So, that's what I try to tell folks, most people don't, if most people live in suburban or city, metropolitan areas. I live out in the woods. I could stand behind a tree beside your house and you would never know I was there because people got their heads buried in their cell phones. They're worried about their 9 to 5, their jobs and the kids and the family and all that. They don't pay attention to their surroundings. And if a creature as intelligent as a Bigfoot, in my opinion, could stand right there and you'd never know it was there,
Right. Well, I tell you, it's funny, several years ago when David Pilates started reporting about the missing 411 and, people disappearing in these national forests and state parks or federal lands and such. And, I got a bit of tiff with him because I had mentioned something on the blog about, well, it was probably Bigfoot that maybe abducted these people, and he really got upset about that. And I think he's kind of softened on that stance. I think from the very beginning, he didn't want people just thinking offhand, out of hand that it was a Bigfoot, that he thought it was a Bigfoot. He really didn't want to give anybody any indication of what he thought it was. He was pretty mum about that. But I tell you, unless the thing with these kids people were abducted by aliens or fell into a portal of some type, I believe there was only one other explanation.
Oh yeah, I mean they would have found them. Some of these people, and there's many different things that could have happened with some of these people. I mean, because some of the stories are that are in his books and stuff are talking about people that just up and vanished and their clothes were sitting there.
Right.
They got sucked into something and then it left the clothes and they were gone. Or it could have been a mountain lion attack, but they would have found something of these people. They never found any, most of those cases, they never found a trace of these people other than some of their clothes and whatnot.
Yeah. If it was a mountain lion, you'd have found blood or tissue or something.
Right.
And, a Bigfoot, if the person wasn't really that big or caused that much problem, they could have grabbed them, put them over his shoulder, and kept them quiet and took them right out of there and not even know about it.
Yep.
So, I don't know. It's one of those things. I guess it's just another mystery. I've been involved. I'm actually in the process of writing a book about alien disclosure right now, and I look at some of the abduction reports that I have received over the years, and quite frankly, if it wasn't some type of anecdotal evidence or statements from the witnesses or the abductees that these were actual otherworldly beings or some type of alien that was involved with the abduction, it could have very easily been a Bigfoot.
Oh yeah,
You
absolutely.
So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. I guess it's really hard to talk about sometimes because people think you're absolutely crazy. When I put it in the blog, I like to get it where people are going to give me their ideas about it. And believe me, I get all kinds of crazy responses sometimes. But
well, everybody has their own opinions, especially.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. But that's what makes it all worth it. Folks sharing their ideas, their opinions, and that's what we have to do more of. Come together as a collective, so to speak, and maybe it'll help us advance. To the next level somehow. It might take many years, but by people talking and brainstorming and sharing ideas, opinions, and counter sightings, the whole 9 yards, then we can, formulate opinions and formulate different, theories and whatnot and pursue those things. And hopefully that'll lead to something more,
Yeah, I wish there was more cooperation, as far as a lot of these investigators, and especially in the Bigfoot community. I mean, it does seem that some people are very reluctant to help. I mean, for the most part, people that I know or who I've worked with are pretty cooperative and free with their information. But of course, you're going to have people out there not going to do that, and that's like any part of the paranormal world. You're going to get people that just want to hold stuff to their vest and not say much about it, and it really doesn't help anybody.
No, it's bad in that situation, and there's many reasons for that because there's so much copying and thievery that goes on. People get, people get really upset and stuff. They think they own an area or they own a particular topic, and it's just real touchy in some aspects, and it's a shame that it's that bad, but that's just the nature of it. I try to help as many people as I can. I always have, and to me, that's what it's all about, but unfortunately, you got a lot of knuckleheads out there that, they just want to, either that or there's just outright blatant stealing and copying of people's material, which I don't, that's, to me, that's just ridiculous. But
yeah, I fight that every day, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I know exactly how that goes. But, I think... Well, I mean, I've known you for a while, and David Weatherly and all, and it seems like there's a certain clique of investigators that don't have any problem sharing information with each other, and I'm glad to be a part of that. In fact, you're going to be a part of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot camping adventure in May and June, so. I'll be able to get to meet you and a lot of other people. That should be an interesting get together.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of great people going to that thing, and I'm really looking forward to it. I know you were there last time, and we kind of missed each other or whatever, and it was bad weather. It was raining the whole time.
It was terrible.
It was a good time though, and I'm sure it's going to be even better this time. I mean, Eric's doing a phenomenal job putting that thing together, and he's got a lot of top-notch people there, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, I suggest anybody that's interested in Bigfoot, and if it's not that far for you to go, I suggest you make the trip because it's I think it'd be well worth your effort because there are going to be a lot of people there. I mean, a lot of people that are involved with Bigfoot research and other cryptid research as well. Yeah, it's going to be a good time for all. I'm quite sure. So, Dave, people want to get in contact with you and share their reports with you. How can they contact you, and where can they get your book?
Yeah, just go to my website, www.davespinksParanormalInvestigator.com. You can, if you have a sighting or encounter you'd like to report, there's a contact page on there. and you can share your report right to my email, and I'll get in touch with you. Love to hear them. You know, I'd love to hear people's sightings and encounters, and even thoughts and ideas on all aspects of the paranormal. You can get my book off of Amazon. Just type in the name West Virginia Bigfoot or my name, and it'll pop up in the authors and books section. Or if you want a signed copy, you can go to my PayPal. It's paypal.me/ Dave Spinks, and you can get a signed copy. It's $18. It tells you all that on there. $18, and that covers shipping as well. The price of the book and shipping. So yeah, if you'd like a signed copy, just get with me, and you can see on my website other items I have available that I've been in, like the Seth Breedlove's Flatwoods Monster Legacy of Fear movie. If you want a signed copy of that, I can hook you up with that. Got a new book coming out on West Virginia ghosts and hauntings any day now, in the next several weeks, anytime it could drop from the publisher. So I'm excited about that. Basically, that book is covering, it's a series of books actually, and it's going to have at least one encounter and investigation from every single county in West Virginia, which is 55 counties. And of course, some counties have multiple investigations I've done over the years in the state. And so I'm really looking forward to that. That's volume 1 of probably a 5-book series I'm doing, because I've done so much here in the state of West Virginia. So I'm super stoked about that.
You know, the moniker for West Virginia is Wild and Wonderful, but I'll be honest with you, I've always considered it more weird and woolly, because it's there's just so much going on in the state of West Virginia.
Oh yeah, man. I mean, I recollect West Virginia to be almost like the Pacific Northwest of the East Coast in a lot of aspects of the Bigfoot sightings. I mean, it's crazy. And there's sightings that go back to the 1700s here, man. You know, that have been reported in church script. You know, in the old days, they used to report sightings and stuff and crazy stuff in the church logs, and before the newspapers were big and everything. So lots of logger reports from the early days and early 1900s. Loggers being attacked by large ape-like men, they called it, you know, and all kinds of crazy stuff. So also, Society of Supernatural, me and Weatherly are putting on an event at my haunted house in Indiana known as Willow's Weep. We've got the haunted collector John Zaffis will be our featured speaker there. June 21st and 22nd, tickets are on sale for that now, for vendor tables, and the Friday night ghost hunt with me, Weatherly, and Zaffis at the house. Going to be a really cool thing, man. This house is unlike any other you've ever heard of. Just a phenomenal thing. We got a book coming out on it later this year, telling the story and all the deaths and stuff that have occurred in this house. It's just crazy, and looking forward to that as well. So you can go to our Society Supernatural Facebook page, go to the events, and you can order tickets now. Early bird special. You'll save money if you order them now.
Well, I have to get you to come back a little bit down the road here, and we can talk about all that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, Dave. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and I'll talk to you when I see you up in Pennsylvania, and you take care.
Hey, you too. Thanks for having me.
Okay, now.
Have a good night.
Now, listeners can show their support for Arcane Radio by becoming a patron. Simply go to fansofmonsters.com and click the Podbean patron banner. Arcane Radio also accepts direct donations. Now, if you have an unexplained encounter or sighting, feel free to contact me through Phantoms of Monsters blog site. I want to again thank Dave Spinks for joining me this evening, and I want to thank you for listening to the show. Good night, and have a safe and happy weekend.